Why didn't you come to Mom's funeral, sis?
What?
I never thought you were such a terrible person.
I was at a loss when my younger brother suddenly said this to me over the phone. But there was no sign of lying in his sobbing voice. James, Mom passed away 5 years ago, you know? My name is Jessica, a 30-year-old office worker. I'm dating a man named Robert, and we've just started seeing each other. He's serious about marrying me and wants to meet my parents soon. But I feel guilty about that. That's because my parents divorced a long time ago, and both of them have already passed away. My father and mother reached an irreparable state due to misunderstandings, and they ended up divorcing. At that time, I was 16. And after the divorce, I was taken in by my father. Even after the divorce, my father cared for me very much and allowed me to do anything I wanted. Thanks to him, I was able to continue learning the piano, which I had been doing since I was young and even attended cram school. In return, I did my best with the household chores, as long as it didn't interfere with my studies. I tried to cook dinner as much as possible, and although it was mostly rice balls, I prepared lunch for my father.
The rice balls you make are always delicious, Jessica.
I remember being happy when my father praised me like that. Then I went on to college. I worked hard in my studies, so I was able to get into a fairly prestigious university.
Jessica, you did a great job. Going to a higher level university than your father and mother is amazing.
I was very happy to see my father's joyful face. By the way, my father told me it was okay to see my mother, so I visited her regularly.
Ah, big sister.
James, long time no see.
Jessica, have you been well?
Yeah, how about you and James, Mom?
I'm fine, and James has more energy than he knows what to do with.
After the divorce, my mother lived with my younger brother, James. James is 7 years younger than me, and he was 11 when I decided to go to college. My elementary school-aged brother still had an innocent look, and he always looked very happy to see me. I was sad not to live with my brother, but I was happy to see him healthy and well when we met regularly.
Jessica, you got into college?
And it's a pretty tough one, isn't it?
That's amazing. Sis, you're awesome.
Thank you both.
Let's go out for steak to celebrate today.
Really? Yay! Wow, steak!
Even though my parents were divorced, I had a good relationship with my mother and brother, and I always felt happy when I saw them. But after I started college, my mother remarried another man. Since then, it became difficult to see my brother.
My husband wants me to get used to our life together, so he doesn't want me to see my previous family too much.
Is that so? I felt mixed emotions when my mother told me this over the phone. Of course, I don't mind, and I'm very happy that my mother has remarried and found happiness. But I don't want to lose the opportunity to see my brother. Can't we just reduce the frequency of our meetings?
I'm sorry, but James is entering adolescence, and I don't want to confuse him too much.
I see.
But once we get used to our new life, I'm sure my husband will let us meet.
Yeah, I understand. I wasn't really convinced, but I didn't want to protest and risk ruining my mother and brother's relationship with their new father, so I decided to endure it. After that, I finished college and got a job. During that time, I couldn't see my brother or mother. It's been 4 years. They could let me see them at least once. No, maybe they're living such fulfilling lives that they don't need to see me anymore. My brother, who was 11 at the time, is now 15. I want to send some encouragement to my brother, who is preparing for private high school entrance exams. With that thought, I bravely called my mother. Then I heard an unfamiliar man's voice.
Hello, who is this?
Isn't this my mother's number?
Are you Jessica by any chance?
Yes.
I'm David, the man who remarried your mother. She is busy right now, so I answered the phone.
Oh, I see.
What's the reason for your call?
Well, it's been 4 years since I last saw them, and I was thinking I'd like to see my brother and mother soon. When I said that, the man named David made a surprising statement.
Really? You haven't seen them?
What?
I thought you were meeting them regularly.
No, I haven't seen them at all.
I see. Maybe your mother doesn't want to see you.
What?
Actually, when I mentioned your name just now, my wife didn't react at all.
That can't be. Is James not around? I at least want my brother to respond to my call. I was thinking that, but David said,
James is right next to me, but he's just playing a game and not reacting at all. It seems like they've both forgotten about you and adapted to their current lives. They're both living happily. So, could you please leave them alone? I'm gonna hang up now.
With that, David hung up. I was so shocked that I couldn't move for a while after the call ended. I didn't want to believe that my brother and mother had forgotten about me and were living their lives. When I consulted my father, he said,
That's strange. Those two love you, Jessica.
And called my mother. But she told him,
Please don't call again.
And in the end, we couldn't meet or talk to my mother and brother. After that, I became busier with work and couldn't see my brother and mother, and time passed with them still in the back of my mind. Then, about 3 years after that phone call, I received sad news.
What? Mom!
It was a notification that my mother had died in a traffic accident. I rushed to the hospital. In the room where the hospital staff guided me, I saw my mother's lifeless body. Her face looked as if she was just sleeping, with her eyes closed and a gentle expression.
No, Mom!
I hadn't seen my mother in 7 years. I never thought I would meet her again like this.
Sis?
James! As I was mourning my mother's death, my brother came into the room. My brother, whom I hadn't seen in 7 years, had grown up completely.
It's been a long time. Why didn't you come to see us? What? Did you start hating me and Mom?
Wait a minute. It was your stepfather, David, who told me not to see you.
Dad? Dad would never say something like that.
What?
Dad's an amazing person, and I look up to him. So he wouldn't say something like not meeting with you, sis.
What? My brother seemed to trust our stepfather, David, quite a bit. They must have formed a strong bond over these 7 years. Then, a man who appeared to be David arrived.
Hi. It's our first time meeting in person, isn't it?
Hello. David was a man in his early 50s, with an ambitious look about him, like someone who could really get things done. I've seen various company employees in my work, and somehow he gave me the impression of being a bit cunning.
I'm really shocked that my wife passed away so suddenly. The funeral will be held soon, so I'd like both you and your father to attend, Jessica.
Understood. There were many things on my mind, but the priority was my mother's funeral. My father and I attended my mother's funeral together and saw her off. The funeral went without incident, but there was a dispute over the inheritance.
Jessica hasn't seen my wife in 7 years. So, could you please give up the inheritance?
What? Wait a minute. Wasn't it David who didn't let me see her? As I said that, my brother interrupted.
Sis, are you still saying that? How many times do I have to explain that Dad would never do that?
James, believe me, your stepfather told me not to see you and Mom anymore. He told me to leave you alone. No matter how desperately I pleaded, my brother wouldn't believe me.
Oh dear, it seems I've become the villain here. Dad's not wrong. Sis is just saying weird things.
James!
Sis, I don't really understand inheritance, but will you give it up?
What? I should at least receive the minimum inheritance, right?
What would Mom think if she saw you being so greedy about money?
David treated me as if I were money grubbing. Then my father stepped in.
Wait a minute. My daughter is only claiming her rightful share. Stop making such accusations.
Thanks to my father's words, David closed his mouth.
No matter what you say, I'll make sure my daughter gets at least the minimum inheritance. What's this? Are you and Sis conspiring to make things difficult for us? That's not the case. This is just a claim of rights.
The discussion was difficult, and in the end, I was able to receive only the minimum inheritance, but a rift formed between my brother and me. It was because I had become antagonistic with David, my brother's trusted stepfather. I had finally seen my brother after so long, only to be disliked by him. Losing my mother was sad enough, and this made it even harder mentally. And then, more misfortune struck me. My father was diagnosed with cancer. He was given only 1 more year to live. I felt like I was being crushed by repeated misfortunes. Why is this happening to me? I became quite negative. But my father, noticing my change, spoke to me gently.
Jessica, everyone dies someday. It's not something we can control. I've been happy living with you all this time, and I intend to enjoy the time I have left to the fullest.
Dad! After that, my father and I went on trips and did everything he wanted to do before he passed away. Losing both of my beloved parents was incredibly painful. But my father's last words were, "Look forward and enjoy every moment of life." So I wiped away my tears and chose to move on. My brother came to my father's funeral, but he brought David with him. Because of that, my brother was aggressive towards me, and all he talked about was my father's inheritance.
Sis, you forcibly took part of Mom's inheritance, so I'm definitely taking Dad's inheritance.
I didn't want to fight or be hostile anymore, so I quietly agreed. Yes, of course. I was planning to give it to you anyway. I said that and made arrangements for the inheritance to be transferred to my brother. I haven't seen my brother since then. He hasn't contacted me, and I felt awkward reaching out to him. A few years passed, and I met Robert through a friend's introduction. He was considering marriage, and I decided to tell him everything. That both my parents were gone, and that I was almost estranged from my only sibling, my brother. Robert listened to everything and still wanted to marry me. I fell in love with him. We continued to date smoothly and received a marriage proposal. This must be what it feels like to be on top of the world. But at the moment, I suddenly received a call from my brother. Hello, James? It's been a while, hasn't it? What's up? Oh, speaking of which, I have something to tell you too. I was so happy to hear from my brother after so long that I started talking rapidly. Then, my brother interrupted me with something incomprehensible.
Sis, why didn't you come to Mom's funeral? I never thought you were such a terrible person.
What?
I didn't think my sister was such a terrible person.
I was confused by my brother's sudden accusation over the phone. What's going on? Why are you saying something so nonsensical all of a sudden?
Nonsensical? Mom's dead, you know.
Wait, James. Calm down.
How can I calm down?
Was this some kind of cruel joke? No, it was too harsh for that. But there was no hint of lying in my sobbing brother's voice. I took a deep breath and calmed myself, and spoke slowly to my brother. James, Mom died 5 years ago. Then my brother's shocking reply came.
What are you talking about? Mom didn't die back then.
What? What are you talking about? You saw Mom's body too, didn't you? And we even had the funeral. I couldn't understand why my brother was saying such things.
No. Mom was alive. I lived with her for about 3 years after that.
What? What do you mean?
So I was living with Mom.
I really couldn't understand what my brother was saying. Mom was alive? It's best to go along with the story at times like this.
Yes, but they said she would die soon without an offering. I gave all the money I earned as an offering.
What? At that moment, I realized that my brother had been deceived.
But the offering wasn't enough, and Mom died.
James, can you introduce me to the person you've been making offerings to?
Of course. You should be saved too, sis. That person found where Mom was and rescued her.
James. Later, I went with my brother to meet the person he had been making offerings to. The place was in a regular office building, where counseling was conducted.
If you counsel with the teacher, he'll solve any problem for you.
Teacher? When my brother led me into a private office, David was there. "Why are you—"
Oh, if it isn't Jessica.
"Wait a minute. You're the one who remarried my mother and became James's stepfather, right? Why is James calling you teacher?"
James and I have a patient-teacher relationship.
"What? No, you lived with James, right? James even called you dad."
Sis, what are you talking about? David is a counselor. Dad died 3 years ago, remember?
Wait, David, are you brainwashing James?
What are you talking about? I've just been listening to him. Before that, I was counseling his mother.
What? You deceived my mother too?
Sis, don't say such terrible things like deceived.
James!
Jessica seems quite confused. Well, it's understandable. Losing both parents can often lead to mental illness.
What are you talking about?
You've unconsciously put a stopper in your mind to avoid facing reality. You're suppressing the grief of losing your parents. I can help you release it.
Stop it! I'm already looking forward and living my life.
Really? Aren't you just enduring it?
I'm not enduring anything.
It's better not to force yourself. If you do as I say, your heart will feel much lighter.
Really?
Really? James became cheerful that way too. So why not entrust yourself to me?
Yes, please.
Good girl. Now sit here and think about your mom and dad. When I place my hands on your head, the sad feelings will magically disappear. How about it? Do you feel lighter?
No, I don't feel any lighter.
I see. Maybe it's because the offering is 0, so there's not enough power.
What?
If you really want to get better, you have to make a lot of offerings.
Is that so?
Yeah. So let's start with an offering of $1,000.
$1,000?
That's still not enough to be completely healed. You need to make more and more offerings.
Is that so? James made offerings too, right?
Yes, he's been making offerings ever since he graduated from high school and started working. That's how he was able to find his mother and regain happy days. But the offerings stopped at one point, and his mother really died this time. So he's reflecting on that and increasing his offerings to be saved.
I see.
I called out towards the entrance.
That's how it is, Robert.
As I said that, the door to the room opened, and my fiancé Robert walked in. Who exactly are you? David asked with a suspicious look at Robert, who then handed David his business card. I'm a lawyer. I've been listening to your conversation, and it seems you've been brainwashing James and swindling a large sum of money from him. A lawyer?
He's also my fiancé, and we're gonna sue you and recover the money.
As I said that, David momentarily looked flustered, but then snorted and retorted. I thought you'd say something like that. James was saved by me. There's no fact that I deceived him. I was just providing legitimate counseling. Right, James? David asked my brother with a triumphant look on his face. My brother glanced at us and then said, I was deceived by you and forced to contribute a large sum of money. James, you... David's eyes widened at my brother's statement. It seems your brother intends to sue you. Wait, this must be some mistake, right? James, I saved you. Are you going to betray me like this? Teacher, I do think that thanks to you, Both my mother and I felt relieved many times. But it's also true that you were gradually brainwashing us, right? In fact, I became unable to make sound judgments because of you. You brought a woman who looked like my mother and made me believe that she was actually alive. And then you instilled fear that she would die if I didn't make offerings. Moreover, you disposed of all the photos of my mother and me without my noticing and replaced them with composite photos of a fake mother. The pictures were so sophisticated and natural that I naturally believed the fake mother was my real mother. And before I knew it, almost all of my salary from the years since I graduated from high school and started working was taken by you. When I met my sister and saw the real photos of my mother, the brainwashing suddenly broke. That's when I decided to sue you, capturing evidence of you actually demanding an exorbitant amount of money. You betrayed me! Don't mess with me. You're the one who kept swindling money from me and my mother. You brainwashed us, telling us not to meet my sister and even made us lie that you were our stepfather. My mother died without seeing my sister for years. I'll not only get back the money you took from me, but also the money you took from my mother. You've sucked money from us and enjoyed yourself. Now suffer misfortune. Ah! My brother angrily confronted David with such intensity that David stumbled back in surprise. Then we'll see you in court, Robert said, and we left the scene. After that, James sued David under Robert's legal representation. David was offered to pay back the total amount of $300,000 that he had swindled from my brother and mother. Not only was David offered to pay compensation, but his outrageous fraudulence became known to his previous patients and their families. And he seems to be in serious trouble due to lawsuits and compensation claims from many people. But he had been doing as he pleased for so long that he deserved to be punished. I realized that our relationship had been strained because of the brainwashing, and with everything resolved, the resentment between my brother and me disappeared. My brother also attended my wedding with Robert. I hadn't seen my brother for many years because of David, but now I want to fill that gap by regularly meeting and getting along well with my only sibling.